Good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of Disability Chat. In this session, Allison Bartlett, HDSA's resident disability expert, will talk about completing the online Social Security Disability Appeal application. You can send a question at any time during the presentation. Just click on the chat function in the toolbar, type your question, and press send. Your questions will be seen only by HDSA. This presentation will be available in about a week on HDSA's YouTube channel or by going to hdsa.org/disability chat. On November 9th, Allison will discuss following up with Social Security, an overview of how to follow up with Social Security once an application or appeal has been submitted, including how often to follow up, what questions to ask, and what to expect from the application review process. And now a bit about Allison. Allison is HDSA's Manager of Disability Program and is a disability attorney who specializes in representing clients with rare chronic conditions like HD to navigate through the complex disability system. Allison holds a JD from the University of Cincinnati College of Law. And now I'll turn our chat over to Allison.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you everyone for joining us today. It's nice to be back. I've returned from maternity leave, and today I will be talking about completing the online Social Security Disability Appeal. So what I'm going to go over is an overview of the online Social Security Disability Appeal, complete with images, including what to expect, what information to include in the application, and how to answer questions. So again, overview, going through the online appeal, how to communicate with Social Security after the appeal is submitted, and general best practices. And I always just like to start this off. You do not have to read the Social Security Act. I just like to put this here as a reminder that the Social Security disability process is governed by federal law. And that's why this process is so difficult, because there really are certain standards that have to be met in order for you to be found disabled. And if you're kind of to start this, Social Security disability is a difficult process. Just because your case has been denied at the initial application or another stage of appeal does not mean your case is going to continue to get denied. Social Security has very strict standards, and I have definitely seen cases where the person very clearly should have been found disabled, and Social Security didn't necessarily do things correctly, something got missed, or the person who reviewed the case just didn't do a great job. And I say this more as a reminder that you can submit the best case possible, and there's still a human component to the Social Security disability process that we cannot control for. And that's really just to say, do not give up. It is worth fighting, it is worth continuing through this process, and it is worth appealing, especially if you have to appear before an administrative law judge. They are the most competent individuals in the process, and you're the most likely to get a positive outcome at the hearing stage. A lot of families give up before the hearing stage, not just with HD, but across the board. And Social Security has kind of designed the system that way because they want people to feel defeated so they don't keep going through the process. I don't want you to ever feel that way, because it is 100% worth fighting. So what I'm going to start today is with the online appeal. The link that you see on the screen is the link to the online appeal, and it takes you to the image, to the web page, an image of what you see on the left. And all of Social Security's appeals are done in the same place. And so there are a couple different levels of appeal. There's reconsideration, that's the first level of appeal. So if you submitted your initial application and you get denied, then you'll go to reconsideration. If you submit a reconsideration appeal and you get denied, then you go to a hearing by an administrative law judge. If you go to a hearing by an administrative law judge and get denied, then you go to the appeals court. I'm not going to really get into it today, but review by appeals court, depending on your case, isn't always the best choice, because it's like the Supreme Court and they can only take cases for very certain circumstances. Again, if you do go to review by appeals counsel and you get denied there, then you go to federal court. But again, all of those appeals are here. What I'm going to be specifically talking about today is reconsideration and hearing by an administrative law judge, because those appeals look exactly the same. So when you start the appeal, whether it's reconsideration or hearing by an administrative law judge, you're going to see this page. And this is both for SSDI and SSI. Once your case gets denied and you're going through the appeals process, the appeals applications are the same, whether you have an SSDI claim or an SSI claim. So this appeal is what you're essentially going to use moving forward. And if you're starting a new appeal, you would hit the start a new appeal button, or if you're returning to a saved appeal, you would return to a saved appeal. And again, just like pretty much anything else these days, there are terms and conditions. These aren't all of them, but the important ones I've included, like what Social Security needs to see for you to complete an electronic appeal request. They need your information, third-party information, medical information, and just an option if you are not able to complete an appeal electronically. It is in your best interest to complete the appeal electronically. The very first question that you're going to get asked on the appeal is information about the applicant. This is if they're going to ask if you're applying for yourself or if you're helping somebody else apply. And I know I stress this a lot. If the HD family member cannot complete the appeal on their own, it is very important for them to get assistance completing the application. The application is designed so someone else can complete the application on the disabled individual's behalf. So it is they make it very easy and straightforward. Either I'm applying for myself or I'm helping someone who is not with me and therefore cannot sign the application at this time. Even if the person is, still check that option. Why? Because it does trigger information to Social Security if the person cannot complete the application on their own. Why do they need help completing the application? And it's important to include that information in the application process. So the next screen, just general information about the applicant. This is very straightforward. Name, Social Security number, date of birth. And then you're asked the preparer's information. And so this is really where it becomes relevant. If you are completing the application on someone else's behalf, they want your information. They want to know it's two different people. They're not necessarily going to send you any information unless you are a legal representative or you have submitted the 1696 appointment of representative form. If you're just a friend or family member and you haven't submitted the legal documents that allow Social Security to speak with you directly, they're never going to send information to you. They just like to have this information on file. But that's why, especially in HD cases, it's really important to submit an appointment of representative form, the 1696, because you don't have to be an attorney to represent a friend or family member, especially because you won't be collecting a fee. Put in the initial contact information, you're going to get a reentry number. Save the reentry number so you can return to the application/appeal. You can have a copy of the reentry number emailed to you, and I recommend doing that so you have it. Also, write it down or copy and paste it somewhere. The appeal does not have to be completed in one sitting. It is better to gather all of the information you need and take your time completing the appeal, even if it takes a few days. Save the reentry number in a safe place, and to get back into the appeal, all you need is the reentry number and the disabled individual Social Security number, and then they'll ask you to confirm your identity. They'll ask again if you are the person the application is for, or if you're the one helping the person. And this is when you want to return to the appeal, this is the screen you will see. Again, just need the reentry number, the applicant's Social Security number, and say, I am the person who needs this, I am the person's attorney, or I am somebody else helping. So request for appeal. Again, this application is the same whether you're applying for reconsideration or for a hearing by an administrative law judge. This image is specifically for an administrative law judge hearing, but you'll be taken to this screen. You just won't ask the question you wish to appear at hearing if it's for reconsideration. As I have highlighted, you only have 60 days to file an appeal. That time can go by really quickly, so you have to remember, you have to make sure you get the appeal in as quickly as possible, because if you miss that 60-day appeal window and you don't have a good reason, you have to start all over. And especially with an HD case, it's always better to appeal the decision than to start over in like 99% of cases. So the first thing is you're going to put what is the date on the notice of decision that you received in the mail. If you didn't receive a letter, you definitely need to contact Social Security, but you should receive a denial letter in the mail. The date on the denial letter is the date you put in the first box. And in most cases, you don't have a claim number. Most people, their claim number is their social security number. The only exceptions are if it's an adult child disability application or a disabled widowed benefits application, then the claim number would be different. And then the third box you see on the screen is, why do you disagree with the determination on the claim made? There is very little space provided to say why you disagree with the determination or the decision, so you need to be as brief and specific as possible. One example for something you can put in is, the previous denial of my claim should be reversed because I am disabled per listing 11.17 for adult onset Huntington's disease and I am unable to work. What is important to stress here is the focus needs to be on your inability to work as a result of your HD. This may sound harsh, but do not waste time or space making an emotional appeal. Social Security does not respond well to emotional appeals. It doesn't work. Also, HD needs to be the primary diagnosis listed in this section if this is really the main reason why you're applying for disability. It is also important to include additional diagnoses if you have them, like depression or anxiety, and if there's space. You only get 200 characters to say why you're disagreeing with the claim. That's not a lot of space, so you need to be brief, to the point. I have HD, my HD prevents me from working, I should be found disabled. And then the last section, again, this is only for the hearing. You won't get asked this if it's reconsideration. Do you wish to appear at hearing? Always check yes. Always want to appear at hearing. I know that can sound scary. It is in your best interest to appear at hearing. If you have an attorney and you go to hearing, you have a 60% chance of being approved. That's the highest chance you have of being approved in the entire application process. Third-party contact. So when you add a third-party contact to the application, the additional contact should be a friend or family member that knows the HD family member well and sees them regularly. It really needs to be somebody who knows you or the person the application is for, because Social Security may send them requesting information like, how does HD impact this person? You don't want that form to get sent to somebody who doesn't really know what's going on. The additional contact can be the same person completing the disability appeal on the HD family member's behalf, unless that person is an attorney. It can't, like, because your attorney will get stuff anyway. And you want to include someone who's familiar with the HD family member symptoms and limitations and can describe how the HD family member struggles on a daily basis and what changes they have made in their life. You don't want someone getting a form that says, and then they say, I don't know how to answer these questions. And do not include doctors here. There is a separate section for doctors, and only include a social worker if there is no other contact options and you have gotten permission from the social worker. Change in conditions. In this section, Social Security is most concerned about the changes in your condition since you submitted your initial application or appeal. They don't need to know the whole story of everything that's going on necessarily. They're really just looking to see what has taken place since you submitted your initial application or your last appeal. Then they're going to ask the date changes in your condition occurred. It's best to general choose a month, not a specific date. Usually what I would do when I was submitting application or appeals on behalf of clients, I would choose the date, like the month that they received their denial letter. Sometimes they're just, especially with HD, sometimes something very specific can happen that can be a clear change. Let's say while the initial application was pending, we got neuropsychiatric testing, and the neuropsychiatric testing really showed a lot of information, but Social Security didn't get in time to make a decision, but it could be a game changer on the appeal. put the date that the neuropsychiatric testing happened. It can be stuff like that. It can be a medical appointment that shows something very clearly has changed. It can be a hospitalization if they got sick and they declined after getting sick. Or if things haven't really changed a lot since you submitted the first application or the first appeal, then put the date that the denial happened. Even if the HD family member's conditions has not changed much or at all, always check yes that conditions have changed and include the symptoms and limitations they experience. Things like chorea, dropping objects, etc. You do not want to leave any section of the application blank, especially a section that gives you the opportunity to describe what the HD family member experiences on a daily basis. There is not a lot of space in this application where you can just include information about your loved one or yourself. Take every character that you were given to make sure Social Security understands what your HD is, how it impacts you, and why you're not able to work. Also, always remember to talk about the HD family member symptoms from the perspective of a bad day. And so those are changing conditions. The new conditions section, only check yes if you've actually been given a new diagnosis. So let's say your doctor has newly diagnosed you with depression or anxiety or PTSD. Like, conditions are not symptoms and limitations. If you're experiencing a new symptom from HD, that will go in your change in conditions section. Only if you've actually been diagnosed with a new condition, check yes in the new conditions section. In my professional experience, I haven't checked yes to new conditions very often because most people aren't diagnosed with conditions, they just develop new symptoms. Now on to medical treatment. On medical treatment, you can see, this is straightforward. Have you used any other names for medical or education records? And since you last told us about medical treatment, have you seen a doctor or healthcare provider or has a future appointment scheduled? The answer to this question should be yes. The answer to this question needs to be yes, because you need to continue to get medical care while your application is pending. You never know when the one additional appointment can change the outcome of your disability application. Because of the nature of HD, I have seen that happen. HD is a progressive condition. Every medical appointment matters. Also have a very frank conversation with your neurologist or your doctor and let them know, like, I'm applying for disability. I know this is not standard practice for HD, but I might need to have appointments a little more often while my claim is pending. And just so you guys know, Social Security is most concerned with appointments that have taken place since you submitted the initial application / first appeal. And the reason for that is they already have all of your files, everything they got from your first application, your first appeal on record. It adds to your claim. They don't have to request all of that again. They have everything in an electronic file, and as the claim progresses, they're most interested in most recent doctor's appointments, because everything just builds to your claim as it's going through the process. For doctors and hospitals, there is a distinction between a doctor or healthcare provider and a hospital or clinic. A doctor or healthcare provider is somebody who has a standalone practice. A hospital or clinic, most centers of excellence are a hospital or clinic. You wouldn't put the name of your neurologist down under the doctor section, you put it down under the hospital or clinic section. You'd say that you will get treated by the neurology department at such and such hospital. I'll get to it. Like in the hospital or clinic section, there is an additional space to add the specific doctors that treat. But if you get treated at Vanderbilt, you're treated by Vanderbilt, not just by like Dr. Clausen or Dr. McFadden. Or if you go to OSU, Ohio State University, you're not just treated by Dr. Clausen, you were treated by Ohio State. And that's what you need to do it by the hospital, but not the doctor. Again, if you have a standalone physician, then put that in the doctor or healthcare provider section. If the physician you see is part of a hospital or clinic system, name the hospital or clinic system. Yeah, and more information about differentiating between doctors and hospitals. If you see more than one medical provider at the same hospital or clinic, then again, only include the information for the hospital clinic. You do not need to provide details about every medical provider if they all provide care at the same location. And the reason for that is Social Security is most interested in where you access your medical records. If you're being treated by a huge hospital or clinic system, there's one centralized medical record department that gets records from all of your doctors. Add as many doctors and hospitals or clinics as necessary, not just the people who treat you for HD. All of your doctors need to be included. That also includes primary care physicians, physical therapists, counselors, etc. Psychiatrists. Take your time when completing this section and make sure you include as much detail as possible. Make sure to include your doctor's up-to-date and accurate contact information, address, phone, and fax. Otherwise, Social Security may not be able to collect your medical records because they may not send the request to the right place. And this is what the doctors and hospital details look like. So this is specifically doctor or healthcare provider, and you can see its name of doctor or healthcare provider at top and the name of practice or medical group at the bottom. If it's a hospital or clinic, those are switched. It would be name of the hospital or clinic and the name of specific doctors. You have the opportunity to include all of that information when you're filling this out. And you see at the bottom, patient ID number, if known, that is on your medical records. If you've been able to access your medical records through your patient portal, add your patient ID number. It makes it a lot easier for them to send a medical record request and for them to find you. Treatment and medical conditions. They want to know the dates that you were treated and what medical conditions you received treatment for. Treatment dates. These dates are important because they help Social Security determine a timeline for when to request medical records. Provide your best guess for first appointment date. Again, Social Security should already have that. If you don't remember the exact date, just like you can even just provide a year. You want to make sure to go farther back in time than is necessary to make sure they actually request all of your records. You can utilize your patient portal to get accurate dates and upcoming appointments. If you cannot get the exact date, then include the month and the year. It is really important to include upcoming appointments, especially if they are scheduled within the next 2 months, because Social Security will likely be able to obtain that information. They will actively try to collect additional records if they know that you either recently had an appointment or you have an appointment scheduled, because that's what's really important when you're filing an appeal. You have to continue to submit new medical evidence. If you were denied in the first place, that means Social Security didn't think medically that you met their strict criteria for being found disabled. That's why it's so important to continue to get medical care and to make sure all of your appointments are included in the application. For medical conditions, only list conditions relevant to the doctor or healthcare provider. Again, if you see a clinic system, that might be a lot of medical conditions because then you have to include everything for all of your doctors. But when you're thinking about this, like if you're seeing a neurologist, they're likely treating you for your adult onset Huntington's disease. If you're seeing a psychologist, that can be for depression or anxiety or adult onset Huntington's disease. If you're seeing a PCP, they're going to treat you for things like high blood pressure, depression, chronic pain, possibly HD, just generalized care. So you want to make sure the medical condition matches up with the doctor you're seeing. You also, what I think is also a good thing to do, especially when you're talking about medical conditions, use this as an opportunity to also talk about your symptoms and limitations. So for HD, you could say, I'm seeing this neurologist for chorea imbalance and incoordination secondary to HD. Or I'm seeing them for memory loss, difficulty concentrating, and anxiety secondary to HD. It gives you more space to include all the things you're experiencing because of your HD and the application, which is what Social Security needs to know. And you want to make it very clear to Social Security what information they need to get from every medical provider. The appeal, just like the initial application, will also ask treatment from the doctor. You do not have to include what happens at every appointment. You can summarize or provide an overview, like you get examinations, medical testing, and treatment plans, or examinations, physical therapy and treatment plans, counseling, therapy, and medication management. If you want to include more detail, feel free to include more detail, but if you're not sure what to say, you can just summarize and provide a general overview. Test ordered by a doctor or healthcare provider. You don't get a lot of space to add a test when you're actually in a certain when you're adding information for a specific clinic or doctor, but there's a separate test section where you can add as many tests as you need to. Standard HD tests are not included on the Social Security application, so you need to choose other and write in the test yourself. And this is included a variety of tests that are common for HD patients. And if you do not know what testing has been done or when it was done, again, check your patient portal for this information. Almost every hospital, clinic, or doctor has a patient portal these days. Use that tool while you're completing your application because it will help you. And again, this is what the medical test section looks like, and you to add as many tests as necessary. Medicines. This is really important in the appeal application because it asks more detailed questions than it does in the initial application. On the initial application, it doesn't ask anything about side effects. If you experience side effects from any of your medications, include in detail what they are, because I have seen Social Security determine that side effects to medications were severe enough to find someone disabled. The condition was also severe enough to be found disabled, but Social Security takes side effects very seriously. General things, spell the name of the medicine correctly. You can use Google to verify the spelling or your patient portal. Make sure the reason for taking the medication matches a symptom, limitation, or condition for the doctor, medical provider, or hospital/clinic that provide the medication. You're taking tetrabenazine because of your HD. Psychiatric medicines because of depression. Just make sure that they're related so it's clear and Social Security understands the whole process. Be sure to include all of your medications, not just medications you're taking for adult onset Huntington's disease, and it is very important to include any and all side effects for your medications, as I mentioned on the last slide. This is what the medicine section looks like. Again, just with medical tests, you can add as many medicines as necessary. Other medical information. Most people will not have information to submit in this category, so it is okay to say no and move on to the next section. If the person applying for disability is between ages 18 and 22, it will be beneficial to include information about school or education records, especially if the individual struggled at school and needed extra assistance or accommodations. It can also be helpful to include information here if you were approved for disability through your long-term disability insurance. If somebody else has a lot of your information that you're not sure Social Security has, put them in the section to make sure that they get it. Activities. So what this activities, that's a word, but really what they're doing is activities of daily living, activities of your daily life. So that includes household tasks, personal care, getting around, hobbies and interests, and social activities. So it's a really broad category. And you have 1,000 characters. Use all of them. All of them. And what helps, because characters are limited, in my experience, what always helped me is I would write these in a Word document first because you can character and word count, and it makes it a lot easier to edit than just doing it in the application. So for activities, just like with new medical conditions, always check yes and include difficulties and limitations you experience every day. Even if things haven't really changed since you submitted the initial application or the last appeal, so always check yes because you want to include all of this information in the appeal. So personal care, do you have trouble dressing? Are you unable to tie your shoes? Do you need reminders to bathe? Do you need a shower bar, shower stool? Chores. Are you able to cook? Have you forgotten food on the stove? Do you have trouble with cleaning? Do you have to take breaks with cleaning now? Do you have to take naps because you have a lot of fatigue? Hobbies. Can you read a book? Can you concentrate to watch a movie or a 30-minute TV show? Are you able to drive? Are you able to hike or do any of those things anymore? When these applications are not, the questions themselves are not hard, but these applications can be very emotionally difficult to complete because you really have to think about all the things you struggle with or can't do anymore. I say that you kind of have to go to a dark place, and nobody wants to go there. It is not fun. It was always the worst part of my job, helping people get to that dark place to really figure figure out what has changed and how things have changed and how HD impacts them. If you cannot figure that out, you're going to continue to get denied because it means you're not being honest on your application and you're not really talking about things that have changed. And don't dismiss something and think Social Security is not going to care. Social Security does care if you can't tie your shoes, or you continue to drop your toothbrush, or if you can't shave anymore. Those things seem minor, but they matter. Social Security is going to care that you have to sit down now to put your pants on. They care that you have to vacuum every day, but now you can only vacuum once a week. They're going to care that you can't wash dishes because you break them. All of it matters. Do not assume Social Security does not care. That is not your decision to make. It is Social Security's, and if you don't give them all of this information, it makes it a lot easier for them to deny you. Again, you do not want to leave any section of the application blank, especially a section that gives you the opportunity to describe what you experience on a daily basis. Always remember to talk about your symptoms and limitations from the perspective of a bad day. It's not what you can do, it's what you cannot do. I say this every time. If you only talk about what you can do, you're going to give Social Security the wrong impression and you are going to get denied. Employment activities. So for most people, you're not going to have a change in work and education. Most people don't go back to work or back to school, especially with HD while their application is pending. If for any reason you do need to say yes to these questions, just be honest. Just because you have attempted to work doesn't mean you're automatically going to get denied. Everything is dependent on circumstances. So I can't give specific details because everybody's circumstance is different, but really the important thing is to be open and honest with Social Security. And this brings us to the last section, the remarks section. You have 2,000 characters here, use all of them. What do you include in the remarks section? Again, it's important to reiterate that you are disabled due to adult onset Huntington's disease. I keep saying adult onset Huntington's disease because that's how Social Security defines it. If you try to find Huntington's disease in the compassionate allowance list, it's under A. You will never find it under H. It's under adult onset Huntington's. So I recommend to everyone to use that phrase when in their initial application and all of their appeals whenever communicating with Social Security. You also want to provide information about what HD is and describe why your HD keeps you from working. I've included a good sample. I should be deemed disabled per adult on, adult listing 11.17 for adult onset Huntington's disease because I experience, and then include your physical, cognitive, and behavioral symptoms and limitations that are relevant to you. And these symptoms from my HD prevent me from working. Really, you want to use the remaining space to provide details and examples of how your symptoms limit you. For example, my memory is severely declined and I forget what. I have difficulty concentrating because. I have trouble using my hands because. I am tripping and falling more because. It doesn't help to just include symptom limitation. You have to include how it also impacts you. Okay, so you have memory loss. Social Security is going to wonder what your memory loss looks like and how it impacts you and why it's relevant to you not being able to work. It's very important to use this section in this space to discuss symptoms and limitations. And you really need to stress what you or your loved one can no longer work as a result of adult onset Huntington's disease symptoms. Once you've done everything else and gone through the remarks section, the last thing that you're going to need to do is complete the medical release form. Do not forget to electronically sign the medical release form so Social Security can request medical records on your behalf. Do it electronically. It makes things so much easier because they can just use an electronic signature and get the process started. If you require them to send something to you, you have to wait to receive it in the mail, you have to sign it, you have to send it back in a timely fashion, you have to make sure the right person at Social Security gets it and uploads it to your claim. Just do it electronically. I didn't get a screenshot of this last page, but once you sign and submit the medical release form, your application will be considered submitted, but you'll be taken to one last page where you can attach medical records and other relevant case documents. If you have medical letters from a doctor, support letters from friends and family, medical records, include those things here. You actually have the opportunity to directly submit that stuff now. You didn't for the initial application, but you can add your own documents for the appeal. Only submit relevant documents. Again, medical letters from a doctor, medical records, support letters from friends and family. Take this opportunity to attach any and all medical records that you have to make sure Social Security has all of the necessary evidence for your claim. This, like, especially if you've had neuropsychiatric testing or you're not sure they got your records from your Center of Excellence or your neurologist, make sure those are definitely attached to your claim if you have them. When communicating with Social Security, it's just important to remember these things. You want to make sure that you answer questions honestly, lots of detail. There is no such thing as providing too much detail when it comes to a Social Security disability claim, because they're analyzing you based on what they see on these pieces of paper. They're never the person who makes a decision on your claim, unless you're appearing before a judge, is not ever going to see you. They're going to decide without talking to you, seeing you. So you really have to do a good job of advocating for yourself through these pieces of paper, through the story that you tell. Do not be afraid to advocate for yourself. You need to follow up regularly. Ask to speak to a supervisor at Social Security if necessary. And you can do this if the person on the phone is informed or unhelpful, the person doesn't believe details about HD or compassionate allowance, or you are not getting adequate updates about your case or information is missing. I know Social Security can be overwhelming and frustrating sometimes, but it's your case. Social Security is not going to fight for you. You have to fight for yourself. And I promise, if you find the right person at Social Security who's incredibly helpful, continue to go to that person. Continue to ask them for things because they're there to help you. And Security is not trying to be mean or vindictive. You're overworked. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so that's okay if you don't like the person you're talking to at that point. You can try to talk to somebody else or speak to a supervisor, because in some circumstances, you need to speak to somebody else who's going to understand your needs and your claim better. General best practices. Do not undermine your symptoms and limitations. Do not make it seem you're better than you are. I have seen this get a lot of HD families in trouble time and time again. Do not tell Social Security you can ride a bike if you haven't touched a bike in 3 years because of balance and coordination issues. Do not tell Social Security you are fine if you are not. Medical records are incredibly important to a disability claim, but Social Security is really weird in that if what you say is more detailed than what your medical records are, Social Security is not going to believe you over your medical records. So like, oh, you're disabled, but you say you're fine. Social Security may be inclined to be like, well, they say they're fine and they don't really need disability, so we're going to go with they're fine and deny their claim. You do not want that to happen. Ask for help. This is not something that should be completed alone. And when I say ask for help, I mean ask a professional for help. Either ask your social worker, contact HDSA for resources, ask me. There's a lot of misinformation about the Social Security disability process. So most people may think they're giving helpful advice, but they might not actually be giving helpful advice. Ask questions if you have questions. This is not an easy process. Ask questions to Social Security. They are there for you to ask your questions. I know they can be frustrating and they don't always get back to you with your questions, but it's always good to reach out and make sure like you have point of contact, because I know while seeing like thorough case files, you have somebody who really is responding to you. It gets documented in your case file when you reach out to Social Security and what questions you ask. And Social Security is generally receptive to people who are taking an interactive stance in their claim. If you are willing to help Social Security, they're more willing to help you. Work with your doctors and social workers throughout this process. Keep them informed. They don't know what's going on with you. They have many patients. It is your responsibility to be communicating with your doctors and your social workers so they know what they need to do. You need to ask your doctors and social workers questions. You need to keep them involved in this process because they're not going to make assumptions about what's going on. They're not just going to complete things for you. You need to ask them to do. Track all of your doctor's appointments and contact information in a journal or a spreadsheet, or again, use your patient portal. Keep an up-to-date list of your medications and why you take them. Again, this can be accessed in your patient portal. And follow up with Social Security regularly once you have submitted your appeal. You want to confirm that the appeal has been received. You want to confirm when your appeal is sent from the field office to Disability Determination Services, or that it's been received by the hearing office. You'll get 2 different letters. So you always get one letter when your application is received by the field office, like we have received your application, it is pending. And then once it's sent to Disability Determination Services, you'll get a letter, or once it's sent to the hearing office, it gets a letter. Average process time for reconsideration is 2 to 4 months. That has definitely been pushed back because of COVID. So when I was representing families prior to COVID, the 2 to 4 months was very accurate. Now it's taking some places up to a year. So it's definitely elongating this process. So I can't give you a clear idea of how long things take now. I just know things have definitely slowed down. Generally speaking, it should only take about a month or 2 for your case to go from the field office to Disability Determination Services. What's causing the delay now is it'll sit at DDS for a long time because they're so backlogged. Your case sits there for months before it's appointed to somebody. And then generally, if you're at the hearing stage, it takes about a month from your case to go from the field office to the hearing. And confirm that Social Security gets your medical records, especially your HD medical records. Once you get to the hearing stage, this is harder once you're at reconsideration. You just need to call and ask. You can technically request a copy of your case file, but it's a lot harder to get at the reconsideration stage. At the hearing stage, you really have to see your entire case file before you have a hearing. So you have access to that. Don't be afraid to ask for it. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Allison, for that really in-depth look at the appeal process. I want to remind everyone that on November 9th, Allison will be talking about how to follow up with Social Security after you have either put in an application or an appeal. Allison's been doing a lot of sessions over the last several months on basically the entire Social Security disability process. So can you remind us basically which webinars you've done and, what was included in each one, so that if somebody has come in late to these webinars, they know where to go for further information if there is something.
So all of the webinars are located at HDSA's YouTube page, which you can access by also going to the disability section of HDSA's website, going to past disability chats. But I have done an overview of the different kinds of disability, private versus public disability, myths about the disability process, what the Social Security 5-step process is, and how Social Security uses their 5-step process to analyze an HD claim, how to prepare for filing a disability application, step-by-step on how to complete the initial online application. Also, how to prepare for the different stages of HD legally, financially, and through disability terms for prodromal HD, early to mid-stage HD, and late-stage HD. So I have covered a wide variety of topics for preparing for this process, but specifically how to complete a disability application and what needs to be included in it and what evidence needs to be gathered.
Thank you. And when people are filling out their disability application or appeal, you told them, you basically suggested that when they need help, they reach out to an HDSA social worker, but you also offered your help. So how can people contact you?
Oh, that's a good question. That's my next slide. I just forgot to go to it. Here's my contact information. I prefer being sent an email first because these are not conversations that are easy to have off the cuff. I prefer an email at abartlett@hdsa.org. So then we can schedule a phone call whenever, so I work with families who Sometimes they need to have an additional family member there. They want to have more than, it's not just the person applying for disability, it's not just the spouse. They want to have a couple people on the phone call. That's always better to schedule in advance. Or you will need to gather evidence or want to be in the right place to write everything down. It's good to kind of like make sure you're setting aside time for this conversation and you're prepared to have this conversation.
Great. Out of curiosity, when Social Security schedules an appearance, are they still doing it in person, or have they switched over to something similar to a Zoom platform?
So based on what they're using a digital platform, they're actually using Microsoft Teams to have disability hearings. And I think this might just stay. I think it's going to be a lot easier for people to appear virtually now. One is, you know, if you're disabled, you may have needed to appear virtually in the first place, but Social Security made it difficult. Now it's a lot easier to do so. And I think it's helping expedite things through the process because a lot more people are showing up to virtual hearings than hearings in person. I think the statistic was at least like 40% of claimants didn't show up for hearings. Their cases were just missed.
So if you are doing a virtual appearance, are you allowed to have additional family members with you at this appearance? And can they offer, let's say, testimony or statements about your particular abilities or, symptoms? Or is this still a one-on-one?
It's a one-on-one. You can always initially a one-on-one, but you can request to have other people testify at your hearing. That is up to the judge's discretion. This is one of the places where it's really important to hire an attorney. You should not be attending a hearing by yourself. You need to have legal representation at the hearing. And you can, you can ask to have somebody appear for you. And how that works is the reason you have to ask to have someone appear is because they can't be in the hearing the whole time. What will happen is the judge will ask you, the person who has HD, who's applying for disability, specific questions. Once they're done questioning that individual, they call in any additional witnesses. Any additional witnesses cannot hear the person applying for disability's testimony because they don't want them to just expound off their answers. The witness has to have their own answer.
Okay. So you can offer, they do have the opportunity. How do they request that somebody else be able to appear at the hearing?
Well, as an attorney, I would always submit a letter to the judge prior to the hearing stating I had an intention of calling a witness and who that witness was going to be. Sometimes judges will just ask family members to testify additionally, because especially with HD, there were certain clients I had that the judge got a sense that they had trouble answering questions, definitely had cognitive impairment. Sometimes the judge will just take it upon themselves to ask a family member who accompanied them to the hearing to answer those questions. Sometimes the loved one is allowed in the room, sometimes they're not. Again, that is specific to the judge. And so that's also going to be true for a virtual video hearing. The judge is also, it's always the judge's discretion if somebody is allowed to be there with you or if they need to step out and then be called in later. But I have had family members testify. I've even had doctors testify. A doctor can testify at your hearing if your doctor is willing to do so.
Excellent information. Well, it doesn't appear we have any more questions at this time, so I do want to thank Allison for this comprehensive presentation, and as well as all the ones that have gone before. I've certainly learned a lot about the disability process, and while I don't need it right now, I'm sure that I'll be able to navigate the system with more ease than I would have in the past. So thank you, Allison. And just a reminder, join us on November 9th. Register for that disability chat by going to hdsa.org /disability chat. Thank you so much and have a great day.